Drew sighed. He really hated boarding school, but conceded there was no alternative for him. It was approaching the midterm long weekend, in November. For many of the boys at Strathfield Academy, it was a day off with nothing to do. Some would go home for the long weekend, most would stay and whittle the time away. This year the music team had decided to make the most of the extra days and rehearse. The intention was to perform a concert at the end of the year. If not otherwise occupied with music, it was expected that you were either part of the cricket team or a spectator. At least those were the rules if you chose to obey them. Drew Baker along with his mates had other ideas. Not that they were real mates, but they stuck together nonetheless. Patrick Bright, Jack Day and Stephen Box were sons of the well-to-do. Drew's father had passed away, his mum, or rather his stepmother and sister, had gone to the country staying with relatives permanently. Without family, Drew stuck with the others for some form of companionship, but in doing so often ran the risk of getting into trouble. Oh well, boys will be boys, and eventually, they become men. One night after prep was finished and they were walking back to the dormitory, they discussed what they would do on the free days. Stephen suggested fishing. It seemed a great idea, but from where would they procure fishing rods and tackle without being noticed? Reading? The general consensus was, you have got to be kidding? We study every day. Pat looked at them with a gleam to his eye. Who's got money? He asked. Why, the others chorused. The races are on this weekend. That's right, said Stephen, it's Cup Week. He turned to the others. It's a tram ride to Flemington, we will need grub and something for, you know. I'm skint until next week, chaps, Pop sends money once a month. Jack looked a little embarrassed. Drew thought about it. He had a little of Dad's money, and he was sure to back a winner, and besides, he'd have one of the chaps in his debt. I'll lend you some, Jack, he said. Thanks, old man. Are you sure? 'Cause there's no point in reminding you? None whatsoever, agreed Drew, smiling. Where have you got spare money, Baker? Asked Pat. Drew touched his nose knowingly. He did not trust Pat Bright as far as he could throw him. That's for me to know and you to find out, he replied airily, unaware of the temptation that hovered. On Sunday evening, when all was quiet in the dormitory, Drew went to his locker where the money to tide him over was stashed in a lock-up case. He counted it, wondering fleetingly if he were doing the right thing, then reassured himself that Mum need nor know, and he might be lucky anyway. Carefully he put some money in the wallet, setting part of it aside for Jack, and locked up. Unbeknownst to him, Pat was watching him. Unbeknownst to Pat, the dorm master was watching them both. He had no suspicions about what Drew was doing, but Mr. Lyons neither liked nor trusted Pat. Next morning, they were ready before the breakfast gong, and were among the first to enter the dining room. They wolfed their meal down, then Stephen spoke up for a few to hear the cue. Well, chaps, we had better hurry and get ready for our walk. Do we have a time frame? Fortunately, no one was really listening. Their escape from the school grounds did not attract attention. As they were allowed to wear casual clothes on holidays, getting on the tram and being seated was no hassle the way the uniform would attract attention. Further, standing all the way would be difficult, given their plans. Although it was Cup Eve, and therefore not as well attended as Cup Day, when the race that stops the nation is held, the boys meandered. Of course, the roses were a riot of color, the final touches of grandeur to the racecourse were being attended to, and up in the food halls were all sorts of culinary aromas emanating in readiness for the big day. They placed their bets looking as nonchalant as possible, given they did not know what they were doing, scrutinizing those in the know and aping them. Watching the race, Drew realized that the horse he had chosen looked rather grand. There again, an old nag would not pass muster when the stakes were high. Nevertheless, he watched, and it came first. Tempting fate, he placed another bet, but sadly, neither Drew nor the horse got anywhere fast. As the day wore on, hunger pangs developed, but before lunch, they placed one last bet, and as a treat, all but Drew bought lemonade. Drew knew instinctively that the innocent-looking liquid was not what they thought. Go on, Baker, join us, sneered Pat. No thanks. She'll be right. Jack watched proceedings, a little uneasy. It was decided that once they had their money, they would call it a day. Jack caught Drew on his own and handed him some of the money he owed. "Thanks, mate," he said. "You will be careful with the other two, won't you?" "How do you mean?" asked Drew. "Just watch your back, that's all," cautioned Jack. "They're coming." Stephen was watching also as he walked towards his mates. "Sho, what were you two up to?" he said. "No flishing good, I'll wager, hick." "Nothin' much," said Drew. "Just watchin' a couple of pisspots staggering about." "What did you call us?" asked Pat. "You heard," answered Drew. "Surely you knew that liquid was cider, Bright?" "I didn't," said Jack. "What does that make me?" "Your steps are steady." Drew looked at Jack with a knowing look. From the corner of his peripheral vision, Drew could see Pat react. He caught Pat's arm, avoiding a right hook in the face. However, Pat had another idea, reaching with his left hand into Drew's pocket. "Is this what you were looking for?" asked Jim. Pat, realizing he was cornered, stood upright and walked away. "That gives me breathing space," laughed Drew. "I would not bet on it, mate," said Jack. "Oh, by the way, it is Box who has your wallet. This one is mine."